Hello future MDs, here's part 2 of Biology Rationale of CEM NMAT Practice Set 2014. You may see the description for the part 1 of this bio review, as well as CEM NMAT questions and other free NMAT reviewers. Special thanks to Miss Angela A. Arma, our lecturer here. She got 98 NMAT PR as I've mentioned in the previous video. Also, she's currently a medicine student at the University of Northern Philippines by the time this video was created. Let's not make the introduction long. Let's start.
Question number 26. The function of mucus secreted by the lining of the alimentary canal is to blank. Let us first define what is mucus. Mucus is a viscous mixture of water, salts, cells, and slippery glycoproteins. In the mouth, specifically in the saliva, it serves as a lubrication for easier swallowing and protection of gums against abrasion. When it comes to gastric mucus or mucus secreted in the stomach, they have a very important function in protection also. Okay, let us first have a review on gastric digestion. Remember that our stomach contains gastric juice that are very essential in breaking down or chemical digestion of our food. It has two main components. The first one is your hydrochloric acid or HCl, which makes the pH of the stomach very acidic, about pH 2. It can unfold or denature the proteins present in our food, exposing now the peptide bonds to the second main component, which is your pepsin. Pepsin is a protease, meaning it is a protein digesting enzyme, and is the reason why the chemical digestion of protein first occurs in the stomach. So here's how gastric juice is produced. First, pepsinogen is secreted by your chief cell. Remember that pepsinogen is inactive. And then your HCl is produced by your parietal cells. HCl is very important in activating the conversion of pepsinogen to its active form, the pepsin. Pepsin then activates more pepsinogen, starting a chain reaction. Pepsin begins the chemical digestion of proteins. Now, the question is, how does stomach avoid digesting itself, considering that its environment is very acidic? One of its ways is through the secretion of mucus by mucosal cells. So here's a diagram that will show you that. So what you can see here, mucus is secreted by your mucus cells, which also secretes the bicarbonate to the mucus. Bicarbonate is very important as it increases the pH of the surface of the epithelial cells, since this is basic, protecting now the epithelial cells from the highly acidic gastric environment. So the answer now here to our question is, the function of the mucus secreted in the lining of the alimentary canal, specifically in the stomach, is for protection of these linings from the digestive juices present. So that would be option C. Question number 27. Which of the following is the organism Archips rosanna most closely related to? Archips rosanna is a binomial name. And as what you can notice, all of our options are written as binomial nomenclature. Binomial nomenclature consists of giving two names to an organism, and it is very important. Okay, let us first review our taxonomy. For easier understanding, all organisms on Earth are categorized into groups. As you recall, here's the taxonomic classification system. The highest in the hierarchy is your domain, followed by kingdom, then by phylum, class, order, family, genus, and lastly, your species. To memorize the taxonomic classification system, just remember this mnemonic. Dear King Philip came over from Great Spain. Again, dear King Philip came over from Great Spain. So dear, since it starts with D, you will now remember the domain, then king for kingdom, Philip for phylum, so on and so forth. Okay, listing down the present taxonomic classification of present humans, it will be this. We belong in the domain Eukarya, kingdom Animalia, phylum Chordata, class Mammalia, order Primata, family Hominidae, genus Homo, and species Sapiens. So the binomial name for humans will be the genus name plus the species name. Hence, we're named as Homo sapiens. Now, do you still remember the Neanderthals? The Neanderthals were believed to coexist with us and for some time are considered as our closest ancient human relatives. So here's the binomial name for Neanderthals. As what you can notice, we belong in the same genus Homo, but we belong in different species. Since the present human belong in the species Sapiens, while Neanderthals belong in the species Neanderthalensis. So let's take note of this relationship when we answer our question. The closest relative of an organism would be another organism with the same genus. The genus name of Archips rosanna is Archips, right? So in our options, only option B has Archips as its genus name too. So the answer is option B, Archips virvidiana, is the closest relative of Archips rosanna among these options. I hope that's clear. Question number 28. When inhaled, which substance can form a more stable compound with hemoglobin, thereby causing adverse reactions in an individual? Is it either nicotine, carbon dioxide, or carbon monoxide? The answer here is quite straightforward, and that is carbon monoxide. So let me just show you the relationship between carbon monoxide and hemoglobin. Hemoglobin combines very readily and almost irreversibly with carbon monoxide. It combines with carbon monoxide 200 to 240 times more readily than it does with oxygen. So what happens is that when carbon monoxide combines with the heme groups in the hemoglobin molecules, carboxyhemoglobin is formed. So what is carboxyhemoglobin? Carboxyhemoglobin is a very stable compound, so it remains combined with hemoglobin for a long time. The problem with carboxyhemoglobin is that it cannot bind with and carry oxygen, resulting to impaired release of oxygen in tissues or hypoxia. Have you heard about carbon monoxide poisoning? So when there's an increased amount of carbon monoxide in your blood, these are the symptoms: dizziness, chest pain, confusion, blurred vision, headache, shortness of breath, nausea, and even death. So again, the compound that forms a more stable compound with hemoglobin is your carbon monoxide. In items 29 and 30, refer to the following setups. Which setup shows phototropism? Again, phototropism is the ability of the plant to reorient the shoot growth towards a direction of light source. So our stimulus here is light or the photo, from the word photo. So here's how phototropism works. So when sunlight is overhead, the IAA molecules or the auxin molecules produced by the apical meristem are distributed evenly in the shoot. So during noon, as what you can see, the IAA molecules here are distributed evenly. However, during early morning or afternoon, once the sunlight shines on the shoot at a certain angle, the auxin molecules move to the far side or to the side where there is no light and induce the elongation of cells on that side. Remember that auxin stimulates the cell division, so that will result to cell elongation. Now, cell elongation results in the bending of the shoot towards the sunlight. A classic example of an experiment that will demonstrate the phototropism is this. So we have your A plant inside a box, and then this box has a small slit or window that will allow the sunlight to pass through. And as what you can notice here, the shoot or the plant grows towards the light source. So this is what we call the positive phototropism of shoots. However, on the root system, you will see that there's negative phototropism because the roots grow towards the side or the opposite side where there is no light source. So going back here to our options, we have here four setups. Among these, the only setup that resembles this experiment is your fourth setup. So this is now our answer. So we have here a plant inside a box, and then you have here a window that will allow the light to pass through. And you will notice here also that the plant grows towards the light source, or it exhibits positive phototropism. Again, so this is the setup that shows phototropism. Question number 30. To find out if photosynthesis takes place, which setup is appropriate to use? We already mentioned in the previous number that setup number 4 exhibits phototropism, so we can already eliminate this. So one of the greatest evidence that a photosynthesis has occurred is the presence of glucose or starch. And one of the classic experiments that will help us determine if starch has been produced is the starch test. In a starch test, a black strip of paper is put on a leaf to avoid being exposed to sunlight. Then after a day or two, this leaf will be boiled down to remove the chlorophyll, and then drops of iodine will be put on the surface of this experimental leaf. Iodine is a purple-colored reagent used to test the presence or absence of starch in the leaf conducted for photosynthesis process. So when iodine test is conducted for the experimental leaf, the leaf where black paper was covered will turn into brown color, and the part of the leaf which is not covered with black paper here, the parts here, will turn into blue-black color, which is positive for the starch test. This result clearly indicates that starch is formed in the leaf where sunlight is available. So here, there will be starch production here. And starch is not formed where the leaf doesn't get sunlight as it is covered with the strip of black paper. Going back to our setups here, setup 2 is clearly a starch test because if you will zoom this in, this is an iodine. And then you have here your experimental leaf to test if a starch has been formed. So the answer here would be setup 2. Question number 31. Which of the following blood vessel carries blood with the highest concentration of oxygen? Again, as a review, let's take a look at this diagram. The gas exchange occurs in the capillary beds of the alveoli within the lungs. And after this, the now oxygen-rich blood flows from the lungs back to the heart through your pulmonary veins. Since the pulmonary vein carries oxygenated blood from the lungs back to the heart, it carries the highest concentration of oxygen. So the answer here would be your pulmonary vein. Question number 32. If lanolin paste with IAA or indole acetic acid or auxin is applied to one side of the stem of a coleus plant, which of the following would be observed in the plant? Remember that auxin can stimulate the initiation of cell division. That is why, as mentioned earlier, greater cell elongation occurs at the region of the stem with more auxin molecules, resulting to the bending of the stem towards the region without the auxin. So, if you apply auxin at this side, for example in this diagram, at the left side, more elongation will occur at the left region, causing now the stem to bend towards the right side or the opposite or untreated region. So let's go back here to the question. If you apply lanolin paste with auxin on only one side of the stem of a coleus plant, what will happen? The answer is option B. Again, it will bend towards the side without the auxin. Question number 33. Transcapillary flow in tissue spaces occurs when the blank. Let's have a review. A capillary is a microscopic blood vessel that penetrates the tissues and allows exchange between the blood and the interstitial fluid. Capillary flow allows the flow of small molecules across capillaries such as glucose and oxygen, here oxygen and nutrients, from the blood into the tissues, and carbon dioxide and waste from the tissues into the blood. I would like to show you a diagram showing the hypothetical fluid exchange between capillaries and the interstitial fluid. Here, the two opposing forces that controls the movement of fluid between the capillaries and the surrounding tissues are your blood pressure and your osmotic pressure. Here's your blood pressure and your osmotic pressure represented by the blue arrow. The blood pressure tends to drive the fluid out of the capillaries, while the osmotic pressure, or the pressure produced by the difference in solute concentration across a membrane, tends to pull the fluid back. Here, the proteins are responsible for much of the blood's osmotic pressure. The presence of proteins in the vessel tends to pull the fluid back. On average, blood pressure is greater than the osmotic pressure, which results to a net loss of fluid from the capillaries. So let's go back here to our question. Transcapillary flow in tissue spaces occurs on average, when the blood pressure is greater than the plasma-osmotic pressure. So that's option B. So our answer here is option B. Question number 34. Short day plants like chrysanthemum and poinsettia bloom naturally in the seasons when the days are short but can also be made to bloom in summer. Which two conditions make it possible for these plants to bloom in summer? Okay, let us have a review on short day plants and long day plants. In short day plants, they flower when a period of darkness, which is uninterrupted, exceeds a critical night length, as what you can see here. The period of darkness exceeds the critical night length. The nights are longer than the day. And in this first scenario, so what you can see, since the night or the period of darkness is shorter, there will be no flowering. And in this third scenario, a flash of light here interrupts the dark period. This will prevent now the flowering. In our long day plants, when a period of darkness is less than the critical night length threshold, as what you can see here, a flower will bloom. In this third scenario, when a flash of light artificially interrupts a long dark period, it will also induce flowering. In the second scenario, no flowering will occur since a period of darkness exceeds the critical night length. So the night is longer than the day, so no flower will bloom. Okay, going back to our question, which two conditions will make it possible for short day plants to bloom in summer? So the first will be they are kept in light-controlled greenhouses. Is this true? Yes. For our second scenario, they are allowed to exceed their critical day length. This is false, since if they are allowed to exceed the critical day length, as what you can see here in the first scenario, no flowering will occur. Scenario number 3, their night length is much above the critical value. So if your night length is much above the critical value, that will induce flowering. So this is also true, just like our first scenario. Scenario number 4, they are exposed to flashes of light at night. As what we've mentioned earlier, if you introduced or if you let a flash of light interrupt the dark period, it will prevent flowering, since flowering will only occur if the period of darkness is uninterrupted. So this is false. So our answer now will be option C. Scenario 1 and Scenario 3 will make it possible for short day plants to bloom in summer. Question number 35. Which of the following can be observed if there is a lack of parathyroid hormone or PTH? Your parathyroid hormone is released by the parathyroid glands located next to the two lobes of thyroid glands in your neck. Parathyroid hormone is essential in the regulation of calcium levels in your blood. You will observe here in the diagram that low plasma calcium levels in the blood will signal the parathyroid gland to release parathyroid hormone, which will now increase the calcium levels in the blood by the first option is to release calcium from the bones, and then to enhance the calcium absorption in the intestine, and to decrease the calcium excretion by the kidneys. So if you have a condition called hypoparathyroidism, where there isn't sufficient release of parathyroid hormone, there will be, of course, a decrease in calcium concentration in your blood. So in our options, we can eliminate options B and C. Now we're only left with option A and D. As what you can see here, parathyroid hormone also stimulates the release of phosphate from bones. However, to prevent detrimental increases in phosphate, parathyroid hormone also increases the elimination of phosphate by the kidneys. Now, if a person has hypoparathyroidism, the excretion of phosphate ions in the urine will be impaired, resulting to the increase in concentration of phosphate in the blood. So that would be option A. There would be a decrease in calcium concentration and an increase in phosphate concentration in the blood in hypoparathyroidism. Question number 36. All of the following are features of plants adapted to dry desert conditions except blank. A classic example of a desert plant is a cactus. Just like most desert plants, it has waxy layer to stop water evaporation, a thick water-storing stem, and they also have spines for protection and to also reduce surface area to decrease the chances of water loss from transpiration. They also have extensive root systems to maximize water uptake. So options A and option B, the reduced leaf surface area and extensive root system, are both characteristics of a desert plant. Option D, sunken pores or stomata, is a characteristic of a desert plant as an adaptation to cut down transpiration. Option C, on the other hand, is definitely not a characteristic of a desert plant, since more stomata means more water loss through transpiration. So the answer here is option C. I would also like you to take note that the process of photosynthesis in desert plants has evolved mechanisms to conserve water. So many succulents keep their stomata closed during the day to prevent water loss and open them in the night to take in carbon dioxide which they store until the next day. I would no longer elaborate that, but I encourage you to read more about C4 and CAM photosynthesis. Question number 37. In which two periods of human life cycle do the greatest physical changes take place? Several developmental processes take place already before we are even born. From being a zygote, after fertilization, we divide into multiple cells and undergo organogenesis to become a fetus. So in just a span of 9 months, lots of physical changes already took place. Another stage of our life where lots of physical changes occur is during adolescence. According to WHO, adolescent period starts at age 10 and ends at age 19. Lots of essential physiological changes occur during this stage, including the development of primary sex characteristics or the reproductive organs, the onset of menstruation in females, and the appearance of secondary sex characteristics, such as, for example, the growth of facial hair and body hair, the development of breast in girls, and the deepening of voice in boys. Other physical changes include rapid growth and alterations in body proportion. Again, the two periods of the human life cycle where the greatest physical changes take place is during adolescence period and before birth. Question number 38. The curve shown above represents data obtained from a group of animals receiving a single daily dose of a drug P. A portion of this group was given the dose at day 1 and the response was noted. The same number of animals was given the dose at day 2 and so on up to day 10. Based on the curve, it can be deduced that the single dose of P used was blank. We can answer this question by simply comprehending what the graph tells us. Okay, so in our y-axis, we have the percent response, and on the x-axis, we have the day of injection. It was mentioned that a single dose of drug P was administered to the animals from day 1 up to day 10. And also, the responses were plotted as follows. So what did you notice regarding the shape of the curve? It is sigmoidal, right? And it actually resembles dose response curve, as what you can see here. You will notice that our x-axis, the day of injection, can also be interpreted as the drug dose. So as you add more dose every day, you will notice that the response also increases. Progressive increases in the drug dose produce increasing response, but only within a relatively narrow range of dose. So here, when you reach the maximum effect range, further increase in dose beyond this range produce little extra effect. Same as here. When you reach this maximum effect range, when you add more dose as the day goes by, little to no effect will be the outcome. Let's go back here to our question. So based on the curve, it can be deduced that a single dose of P used was blank. So we're particularly interested in this part of the graph. Is it A, completely eliminated from the body in less than 24 hours? This is obviously false. Option B, just enough to elicit the highest possible response. This is also false since we need 6 doses to elicit the maximum effect. Option C, more than enough to elicit the highest possible response, is also false since again we need at least 6 doses of the drug P to achieve the maximum response. Option D, less than enough to elicit the highest possible response, is true. So our answer here is option D. Question number 39. Our atmosphere is 78% nitrogen. In spite of this abundance, nitrogen is a limiting factor in plant growth. This is primarily due to the fact that, here's an image of a nitrogen. The triple bond of a nitrogen molecule present in the atmosphere is very difficult to break, so it is energetically unfavorable for plants to spend energy to split nitrogen molecule for their use. So here comes this very important process, which is what we call the biological nitrogen fixation. Nitrogen fixation is the process of breaking apart the two atoms in a nitrogen molecule. Plants get their nitrogen here's your plant. They get their nitrogen from the soil, where it has already been fixed by your nitrogen-fixing bacteria. These bacteria in the soil and in the root nodules of legumes have the ability to convert the nitrogen to ammonia, and then from here, various microorganisms convert ammonia to other nitrogen compounds that are easier for plants to use. So going back here to our question, the reason why plants cannot directly utilize the nitrogen in the air is because they cannot absorb nitrogen directly. They need the help of your nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Question number 40. The various communities existing at different points in time, from the pioneer community to the climax community, is known as blank. For us to be able to answer this, we should have a basic knowledge on ecological succession. Ecological succession is a series of progressive changes in the composition of terrestrial communities over time. So following a severe disturbance, the disturbed area may be colonized by a variety of species which are gradually replaced by other species, which are in turn replaced by still other species. That's why it's called succession. An ecological succession can be a primary succession or a secondary succession. So when this process begins in a virtually lifeless area, such as on a new volcanic island, it's called a primary succession. In this diagram, you can see that the first colonizers in these bare rocks are the lichens and your mosses. Then, due to weathering and accumulation of organic matter from the decomposed remains of the early colonizer, soil will develop. Then gradually, once the soil is present, the lichens and mosses are usually overgrown by the grasses, shrubs, and trees that sprout from seeds blown in from the nearby areas or carried in by animals. Eventually, an area is colonized by plants that become the community's dominant form of vegetation. So, these trees, they are the climax community. Climax community is the end point of succession. This climax community remains unchanged until destroyed by an event such as fire, leading to secondary succession. In contrary to the primary succession, secondary succession involves recolonization of an area after a major disturbance, which has removed most but not all of the organisms in a community. So it can return to its original state, just like here, or it may be replaced by different species and types of vegetation. Several communities, or several stage of succession, here refers to the communities which come in between your pioneer community or your pioneer species here and your climax community here. So these intermediate species, they are called the seral communities or seral stage. So going back to our question, the various communities existing at different points in time from the pioneer community to the climax community is actually known as the seral stages. I hope that's clear. Question number 41. Which of the following explains why green plants do not grow in oceans at depths greater than 18 meters? As you recall, plants rely on photosynthesis for energy and for their growth, and the key requirement for photosynthesis is sunlight. Ocean water absorbs light, so light availability decreases exponentially with depth. So what you can see here, so the deeper you go, the less light is available, so less growth of plants. The answer here therefore is option B. Insufficient sunlight penetrates beyond this depth. Question number 42. If all green plants on Earth suddenly died, which gas would most likely decline in quantity? Again, all green plants carry out the process of photosynthesis, and here's the chemical equation for that. As what you can see, one of the products of photosynthesis is the gas oxygen. So it just makes sense that if green plants die, the gas that would most likely decline in quantity would be oxygen. Question number 43. Which biome has the highest annual rainfall? We have here a graph showing you the annual precipitation of all biomes. As its name implies, as what you can see, tropical rainforest is the one with the highest annual precipitation or rainfall. The lowest annual precipitation, on the other hand, occurs in the desert, obviously. So it occurs in the cold desert or in subtropical desert. Let us discuss also the tundra. What is it? In Arctic tundra, precipitation averages from 20 to 60 centimeters annually, but may exceed 100 centimeters in alpine tundra. The vegetation here is mostly herbaceous, consisting of a mixture of mosses, grasses, along with some dwarf shrubs and trees and lichens. It has a permanently frozen layer of soil called the permafrost, which restricts the growth of plant roots. That's why you can see the vegetations here are dwarf. And taiga, on the other hand, is also called the boreal forest. It can be seen in Canada. So again, let's go back here to our question. Which biome has the highest annual rainfall? The answer is rainforest. Question number 44. Which of the following is the ocean zone that is exposed during low tide and covered during high tide? Okay, let us take a look here at the marine zonation. The marine environment is generally classified on the basis of first, light penetration. It can be photic or aphotic. So photic here, the upper photic zone, is the region where there is sufficient light for photosynthesis, while the lower aphotic zone is the region where little light penetrates. It can also be classified whether the environment is open water or on the bottom. So we have here pelagic zone, the benthic zone, and the abyssal zone. As what you can see here, pelagic zone is the combination of photic zone and aphotic zone. It contains the vast open waters of the ocean. And deep in the aphotic zone, as what you can see, lies the abyssal zone. It is the part of the ocean that is 2,000 to 6,000 meters below the surface. And at the bottom of all these aquatic zones, deep or shallow, is your benthic zone. The marine environment can also be classified based on their distance from shore and water depth. So we have here the intertidal zone, the neritic zone, and your oceanic zone. Intertidal zone, also known as near shore or littoral zone, is the region in which tides expose the sea bottom for some part of each day. So it is periodically submerged and exposed by tides twice daily on most marine shores. So we've already defined here the zones, and let us go back here to our question. Which of the following is the ocean zone that is exposed during low tide and covered during high tide? Okay, so the answer here now is quite obvious. That would be the intertidal zone. The intertidal zone again is also known as the littoral zone. The answer here is option B. Question number 45. In any season, competition for light is most intense among the plants of blank. The answer here is tropical rainforest, and that is evident through the forest canopy layers. The competition for sunlight among rainforest trees leads to the remarkably consistent pattern of tree sizes. As what you can see here, the forest is vertically layered. The tallest trees in the emergent layer, our tree here in the emergent layer, have full access to sunlight, 100% sunlight, while the shrubs in the forest floor only have 2% access to the sunlight. So plant survival in tropical rainforest depends on the plant's ability to first tolerate constant shade if they are located here in the forest floor, or to adapt strategies to reach the sunlight or to grow until they reach the emergent layer to have full access to sunlight. This is the reason why when you go to rainforest, you will observe that the trees there or the vegetation there have different sizes. It is because of the intense competition for sunlight. Again, the answer here is tropical rainforest. Question number 46. Which of the following graphs accurately illustrates the change in the biomass of anaerobic organisms in an aquatic system that changes from oligotrophic to eutrophic? Let us first have a definition of terms. Oligotrophic refers to an environment which is nutrient poor but oxygen rich. Eutrophic, on the other hand, refers to an environment that is nutrient rich but oxygen poor. And as what you can see here, oligotrophic can really convert to eutrophic through the process of eutrophication. Eutrophication occurs when the nutrient status of an ecosystem changes from nutrient poor or oligotrophic to nutrient rich or eutrophic. As what you can see here, this is an oligotrophic lake, and then eventually it will turn into eutrophic as nutrient increases in the environment. Although eutrophication is natural, humans can accelerate this process by overusing fertilizers or carrying out activities that contribute excess amounts of nitrogen and phosphorus into the water. Now, when you increase the available nutrients, the growth of phytoplanktons or algae present in the body of water also increases, resulting to algal blooms or red tide. So going back, which among these graphs accurately describe the growth or the increase in biomass of anaerobic organisms or algae when you convert an oligotrophic environment to eutrophic environment? As discussed, as you increase the nutrient, you also increase the growth. So if you add more nitrogen or phosphate, the algae will continue to grow, and that would be correctly illustrated by graph B. There will be a linear increase in biomass over time. So the answer here is option B. Question number 47. The members of a given species are rarely, if ever, uniformly distributed throughout their range. Instead, they are collected into smaller groups called populations. Which of the following best explains this phenomenon? So the question asks, why are species collected in populations, and why are they not uniformly distributed? Okay, so one of the primary factors that influence population distribution is the availability of limiting resources in the environment. So what are these limited resources? These are your energy or food, shelter, refuge from predators, nutrient availability, water, and of course suitable nesting sites. Since it is rare to find an environment with uniform distribution of these resources, it would also be rare to find a uniform population distribution of this species throughout their range. So the answer here is quite straightforward. It will be option B. The physical factors in the environment upon which they depend are themselves not uniformly distributed. Now that we've mentioned about the influence of availability of resources on population distribution, I would also like to discuss about the carrying capacity, which is a very important concept in ecology. Okay, so we have here a graph of population growth. And as what you can notice, population growth follows a logistic model rather than a linear model. And this logistic model describes how population grows more slowly as it approaches the carrying capacity. So what is a carrying capacity? Carrying capacity is the maximum population size that a particular environment can sustain. So it depends on the abundance of limiting resources that we've mentioned earlier in the habitat. So the question is, how come the growth rate decreases as it approaches the carrying capacity? So as population density increases, density-dependent mechanisms operating within a species can slow or stop the population growth by either decreasing the birth rate or increasing the death rate. So these density-dependent limiting factors include first your competition for limited resources or space, and then the increased predation, the occurrence of diseases, and the intrinsic physiological factors operating within a species rather. So again, I would like you to take note of the concept of carrying capacity. Question number 48. The fast rate of population growth and widespread malnutrition are common in India and the Philippines. This proves that, to answer this type of question, it is important to base your answer only on the information given in the statement. In this statement, the information we have are the fast rate of population, the increase in malnutrition, and the countries Philippines and India. So our answer should only revolve around this info and nothing else. We should look at the relationship between this information rather than making assumptions. Okay, let's start with option D. When population increases, food supply decreases. Due to limited resources, when the demand for food increases because of population increase, food supply might be affected. But food supply decrease does not automatically means malnutrition. Remember that there are other forms of malnutrition aside from undernutrition. Obesity and overweight is also a form of malnutrition. Option C, malnutrition is a characteristic of developing countries. Our statement only mentioned India and Philippines, right? So although they're both developing countries, we cannot generalize. The occurrence of widespread malnutrition might not be present in other developing countries. Option B, extreme poverty among people results in malnutrition. Poverty is caused by a lot of factors, and one of those is high population. And yes, poverty can result in malnutrition. However, we will choose the answer that is derived on the information given in the premise, your fast rate population growth and increase in malnutrition. So this is also, we can already eliminate this. Option A, malnutrition is an effect of fast population growth, is an answer that contains the important information given in our statement, the fast rate of population growth and increase in malnutrition. It showed the relationship between these two, so this is our best answer. Question number 49. An organized collection of interacting species is known as blank. To answer this, let us review the hierarchical levels of ecology. The lowest in the hierarchy is the individual, followed by population, which is a group of organisms of one species. Now, when you have a community, it means you have a collection of several interacting populations, meaning different species that inhabit a common environment. Now, in ecosystem, you take into account the interaction of populations in a community plus the biotic and the abiotic factors. In a biome, you just have a collection of ecosystems. Now in biosphere, the highest in the hierarchy, it just refers to the global ecosystem. Okay, let's go back here to our question. An organized collection of interacting species is known as blank. So interacting species meaning it contains more than one species, right? So it will refer to the community. Again, community is a collection of several interacting populations or with different species that inhabit a common environment. So the answer here is community. Question number 50. In an area of 50 hectares, the tamaraw population was 40. 2 months later, in the same area, the population was halved. Which of the following is least likely to account for the rapid change in population size? Population size is affected by addition and removal of individuals from a population. Addition occurs through birth or through immigration or the influx of new individuals from other areas to a new area. Removal, on the other hand, are caused by death or mortality and emigration or the movement of individuals out of the population into other locations. Now let's go back here to our options. Option D, a new disease-causing organism was brought into the community, will cause more death or mortality. So it will decrease the population size. So this is possible. Option C, emigration had occurred, will also decrease the population size. Option B, predators became more numerous, will lead into more death. So another decrease in the population size. Option A, the tamaraws stop breeding. Breeding will lead to less birth number or birth count. So it will also lead to lower number of individuals in a population. Out of these options, only option A is least likely to occur. Why is that? It is because it is in the natural instinct of animals to mate, to regulate or maintain population size. So this is the best answer.